Good morning. We were in the middle of learning the Makoros. Yesterday we saw Radak, Rabbeinu Bachya, Marshal, Marsha, Shloah Kodesh. And today we're going to start, we'll continue historically, although we do need to circle back to the Rishonim. Quite important actually. But we'll do a range of, we'll go interestingly to the Chasidic tradition. And I know we're now losing, the chronology is a little bit wrong, but too bad. Let's the Baal Shem Tov. Yes, next thing on your Baal Shem Tov. Tam lama anu oimrim elikeinu velekei avoseinu. So the Baal Shem Tov, this is Ala Torah, the brought in the Sefer Keser Shem Tov, and he explains why in the beginning of Shemona Esrei do we say Elikeinu velekei avoseinu. Ki yesh shnei sugei bnei Adam ha'ma'aminim b'Hashem Yizbarach. There are two types of people who have belief in Hashem. Aleph shema'amin b'Kadosh Baruch Hu machmas shahilach b'darchei avosav ha'kadmonim, because he is trustful of the Messiah. Ve'im kol zeh emunah chazaka, and despite almost the fact that he is trusting his Messiah, his Emunah is strong. V'habes, and there's another, who is hu misheba al ha'amonas hadas machmas ha'chakira, somebody who arrives at the same destination, but through a different route, through a different journey, and this journey is one of philosophical inquiry. Now, I use this word philosophical in a very broad, generic sense, because I think you do need to be aware that from the time of the Rambam until into the 14th century, there was a controversy, various bans, and a lot of, more than just discussion, but division, deep division in Klal Yisrael, in our Chachomim, as to the approach to philosophy. The ban on the works of the Rambam himself, the burning of the books of the Rambam, all the way down to 1305, when the Rashba issues a ban on the study of philosophy. And this is actually a compromise. It's not a history. I would highly recommend that you watch or you listen to my good friend Rabbi Aubrey Hirsch's history podcast. I think it's called History for the Curious or something like that. And he discusses this. If you want all the historical data, and he's done incredible research. He's really awesome. He's a really expert in this area. But so I'm just going to mention this very briefly in parentheses. It's in the Tshuvas Rashba, but basically, and even the Meiri then disagrees with the Rashba. There is massive machlekas. What is the right approach to Chochma Yevonis? Greek philosophy, the study of metaphysics, and the study and the understanding and using the danger of interpreting the Torah allegorically, or very close to being allegory and not at face value.
Is that an antagonism to Haskalah?
This is hundreds of years before Haskalah, my friend.
I'm saying not chronologically, but in the sense of like from its position.
I'm not sure I understand you.
No, but I'm just
Haskalah
saying,
comes hundreds of years later.
No, I'm just saying.
What are you saying?
I'm saying like the movement itself, or the notion is like diametrically opposed to the spirit which appeared later in the form of Haskalah.
I suppose at some level. Yeah, I suppose. So the Rashba is actually a compromise at some level, because what he actually does is, in 1305, he issues this ban, and he says, nobody under the age of 25 can study philosophy and Greek philosophy, so he limits it somewhat. It's a little bit of a compromise, but just to be aware that... Sorry? Rashba, in his famous ban of 1305, which is in Tshuvas Rashba. it's only somebody's under the age of 25, and then when you've learned more, etc., which is actually, interestingly, potentially a little bit of a compromise. But the controversy rages on to some extent today. Like I said to you, at some way, there are those who, and this is why this is important. I think that we learn. You're going to see what the Baal Shem Tov and the Baditsheva and the Noam Elimelech say, hardcore Hasidus, because it's often thought of that, I think mistakenly, that the Hasidic tradition is keep your head down, don't ask questions, don't use your brain, just have Emunah and the Rebbe and the Hashem and the Torah, not always in that order, but okay, you know what I mean. I'm being a bit naughty. But I'm going to show you, that's why I think it's important, and that's why I'm mentioning it in this stage, that even within the Hasidic tradition, the way that it is often portrayed or misconstrued as a maximalist position, in other words, it's very, very binary, is not true, is simply not true. So, I think what I'm trying to show you is there is a huge range of Makoros, from the Rishonim all the way down, and the stuff in the middle, we have to go back and plug some of the gaps, the Malbim and various others, to show that we do accept, of course, you would be arrogant and just it would be stupid, frankly, to ignore the Kabbalah of everybody from Moshe Rabbeinu all the way down and just sort of start again with a blank slate. Nobody would suggest that would be appropriate. So of course you accept, but that doesn't mean you then just accept in a very naive way and never engage your brain to enhance, to augment, to support, to deepen your own Emunah through various means, which could include, like we said yesterday, Hashgacha. It could include a story. It could include also using your brain and learning, but it's not the starting from a blank slate. I hope I've made that clear. Yes? Mm-hmm. Let's make it. So now, having said that, let's go inside and hear what the Baal Shem Tov says. Apshat. Elokeinu v'elokei Avoseinu. There's two types of people. There are those who believe just on the basis of Kabbalah, and there are others who make that journey. Let's say, and you may be well familiar with this, people who have a secular background and become religious. That is, ever heard of those? So there was no Kabbalah. There was no Messiah, but people who, through a range of experiences and an intellectual and or emotional journey, arrive at that destination. So it's Elokeinu, but not necessarily Elokei Avoseinu. So one has Ha'alef, Yesh Le'mayla She'efshel Lefato Soisoi, Afim Yemose Le'kama Chakiris HaSoisoi Chas V'Sholom, Ki Emunah Chazok Mitzad Kabbalah Savoisov. If you trust your parents, your Rebbes, and the Messiah, then somebody can come along and say, did you know science has now discovered that the world is now 14 billion years old? How does the average Orthodox Jew respond?
Average?
The average Orthodox Jew who says, the science now, by the way, science pretty much unequivocally tells us that the universe, there's two, there's the universe and there's the earth, and we shouldn't get confused between the two. But either way, it ain't 5,784 years. They are all in the same thing. So what do you think? What is the average Orthodox Jew? I mean, I don't want to do this on camera, but if you were, as happens to me quite regularly, I'm taking a plane ride later today, and could well be somebody sits next to me and engages me in conversation and da-da-da-da-da. Oh, really? You sorry individual, how on earth can you hold such a view when it is absolutely clear that science says the opposite? So there are a number of responses and approaches to that. And as we will see later, hopefully today still in the Chuvas, in the Reb Sadia Gaon, which we're going to go back to, what is your response? Do you have a response? But one thing is for sure. What is the likelihood? Let me ask you a question. What do you think is the statistical likelihood? Let's take all the conversations that have ever taken place between a yeshiva bacher or a frum guy and the secular, atheist, humanist, Jew, non-Jew who sits next to him on a plane, on a train, and wherever it is, and tries to tell him that he's an idiot. What percentage do you think is there from the atheist perspective of success? How many times do you think they've really been successful?
From the atheist point of view, it's more times than the other way around.
No.
Okay, so really.
I don't know if I understood your phrasing.
So let me say it again.
I think that the atheist will not get, from his point of view, satisfactory answers from the.
That's not what I asked. Sorry, I asked how. Okay, let me make it clearer. Maybe I was being too complex. Of the, let's call it 100,000 incidents of an atheist sitting next to a religious Jew, what percentage do you think of those, the outcome of those conversations is that the atheist turned the Jew off the derech and succeeded in convincing him that his Torah is stupid? What percentage do you think?
Very, very low.
Thank you. Very, very low.
Close to nothing.
Close to nothing. Thank you. Why? Why do you think that is? That the atheist will say, excuse me, it is absolutely, it's uncontroversial. It is totally accepted by mainstream science today, as it is, that the world is X number of million or billion years old, and your tradition tells you a ridiculous number that makes zero sense.
Because a Jew doesn't care about scientific proof or disproof.
Now, and is that not problematic? What do you mean? How can we not care?
In the sense of
we do care.
We care if it's about science.
But it is. The science is incontrovertible, isn't it?
Yeah, but not if it's about.
Well, okay. I'm not actually putting you on the spot now because
either this person and most religious person haven't. I would say the average has a thought through answer or somewhat of a answer that will satisfy bringing into harmony a scientific reality versus a religious reality, and show that they're not in contradiction. They're just talking about different things, maybe, or addressing different aspects of one reality, or probably most don't care and will not really bother.
That's right. It doesn't bother them. Now, that may be a good thing, it may be a bad thing. All I'm doing is at this stage, and we should actually do this at some point. It just occurred to me, we really should. But if I am totally convinced of a position, in the same way, by the way, in the same way that most, say, political conversations, and it could be pro and anti-abortion, it could be Trump versus Biden, whatever, it doesn't matter. That the likelihood and the success is highly, very, very, very small. We've made our mind up. That's it. And I'm not actually open to being questioned. So if it is based on trust, this is what the Baal Shem Tov is saying, so I don't care. You can bring me chakiros and things which go against what my trust, but my trust is still there. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing or right or wrong is a story of another time, but that is the reality. So you have an advantage if you genuinely believe on the basis of Messiah, you're good. Your Emunah is pretty safe. Avol, on the other hand, yesh le chisaron. You do have a chisaron. Sheha Emunah etzlei rak mitzvahs anoshim melumoda beli ta'am v'seichel. Strong. This is the Baal Shem Tov. Your Emunah is mitzvahs anoshim melumoda beli ta'am v'seichel. Avol habeis, on the other hand, a guy who worked it out, so to speak, who came to a realization through an intellectual process. Sorry?
He also has.
We're going to come to that. Give him a chance. Aval habeis, yesh lo meila shemachmas shehikar Rabbi Rizbarch machmas gedel chakirosoi hu chozok be'emunah shalema u'be'ahava gemura. Beautiful words. The person who went on this odyssey, this journey, and arrived to the destination on his own through intellectual inquiry, he is chozok be'emunah shalema u'be'ahava gemura. I found that really interesting. He adds in there's an ahava gemura. Aval, here you come, Eli, gam kedesh lechisaroin shebekal yochelim lefatoisai. If it was based on your research, then if somebody comes along and could theoretically manage to show you newer research, better research, more different, and you might be persuaded the other way, and then it's gone. If it's all based on a proof, then if you get a counter proof, then It can go. He can be persuaded. And this seems to be where we're going. But if you have both, ein lemalo heimenu. This is the best, the optimal, the ideal. I rely, I trust. These are trustworthy people. That's what I said to you yesterday. There's a clearly identifiable chain of Messiah, of people who we know were geniuses. Can you imagine? The Rambam, Rabbi Kiva Eger, Rabbi Avro, if you think about our tradition of people who have sat with incredible minds, who have sat and learned and critically examined Torah again and again and again. No other text in the field of human history or experience, such as a Gemara, say, Yevamah Beis Amud Aleph, with all of its thing, has been learnt so many times by so many people with such eon and such incredible intense examination and analysis, critical analysis, and has come up again and again and again. No genius, and boy, we know geniuses, has ever come up and said, this is just it's wrong, it doesn't work, it doesn't make sense. So this is part of it, and it leads to, and we will at some point talk about how Torah is a vehicle to Emunah. Talk about that. So if you got that, and then you augment it also with your own brain, wow, that's the Baal Shem Tov. Okay?
Especially if you learn partially the same processes that the minds
absolutely
were going through.
How they got there. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So therefore, that's the Baal Shem Tov. And I think, I must say, the first time I saw this...
in the name of the Baal Shem Tov.
Okay. Nobody's questioning that it isn't. As far as I'm aware, there is no polemic. No, there is no polemic. We would know about it. There is no polemical literature that questions the authenticity. Because as we know, the Baal Shem Tov, we don't have anything directly written from him. But this is Keser Shem Tov is acknowledged by the Chasidic tradition. So I think there's no reason to doubt it unless you have a...
I didn't doubt it, I'm just pointing it out.
Yeah, I know that. I said anybody knows. Of course, there was nothing written by him. But nobody has challenged it.
I'm not trying to challenge.
Yeah, I know, but I'm pointing out nobody has.
Yeah, I see.
So therefore it is perfectly legitimate. No, I'm making the point. It is therefore perfectly legitimate to accept this as an authentic representation of what he was alleged to have said and written. Whether it's the words, he's not a Rishon, but the concept certainly. And let's support it further by another classic, another Hasidic classic, which we do know, and that is the Kedushas Levi. Is that good enough for you guys? The Berditchever. And he writes in his Haggadah, Kedushas Levi. This he wrote. This is what he wrote. He named.
That I am a cover. Yeah.
Fine, good. You see, this is what we do. This is, no, you're being very Jewish, which is great. This is what we do. We don't accept stuff from anybody. We argue. Am Kshay Eiref, you are right. You're just proving my point. Right, Hinei Harizal. I love it. Hinei Harizal Zal Kosav Ala Posuk. Oh, this is a beautiful pshat. I don't know if you noticed, by the way, as we've gone along in the last 1 or 2 days, we've picked up some beautiful pshatim in psukim, and we're going to see some more. There's in Yeshaya's vision of Malachim, of the Kisei HaKovod, his vision, which is very different to that of Yechezkel, and that's another whole story. But he says that the angels, Bishtayim Yechase Ponov, Ubishtayim Yechase Raglov, Ubishtayim Ye'oifef. They have 6 wings, as is well known. With two of them, they cover their faces. With 2 of them, they cover their legs. And with 2 of them, they fly. Ki haklal. So he allegorically, or metaphorically, with pshat, a drush, he says the Berditchever, a pshat in posuk. Ki haklal, she'odom osur lo lachker ba'avodas alekus, masha'in sichlei masig chas v'sholem. As the Gemara tells us in Mishnah, the Gemara tells us in Chagiga, that there are certain things that it is also to contemplate. Malamala, malamata. There are things, because these are things that we cannot, there's no point, and therefore it is forbidden, to be nichnas lepardes and to examine something that you have no hope of being able to work out, because they are by definition above you and you have no... Therefore, for those 2, yichase ponov, you cover your face. V'zeu k'koifa be'ikah. Malamala, v'zeh b'shtayim yichase ponov. Now the next 2, u'b'shtayim yichase raglov, Dahainu shelo yomar Adam. So cover your legs. What does that mean? It means he says that a person shouldn't say, Im Kain, lo yachkor, you know what? I'm not allowed to think. Okay. So then I'm not going to clarify anything. Even those things, afilu b'masha seichel masig. They're also, if that, a person might say that I'm not going to discuss or clarify or analyze anything at all. He says that's adarabba. Tzorich adam lachkor b'ma sheseichel shaloi masig. You do have to achieve intellectually what you are able to achieve. Now, how does that work into the two, covering their legs? Mm-hmm. I'm not sure. I struggled with this a little bit. Legs meaning going forward, and they covered them. So the first one was covering your face, which is actually, that's what you're meant to do, i.e. not to look, not to analyze into things that you can't. But the other two, I don't know how he fits it into the Pasuk. I don't really care too much, the pity. I'll have to think about it a bit more. But either way, he says it's referencing, and he makes his point very clear. Avol lachkor b'zeh she'ein seichel adam masig ze osur. Be'emes Hashem yizbarach ein soif. There are things that you can't understand, and those you should not contemplate. But those things that you can clarify, of course you must. There's the Bedichva. Good?
You said 2 shiurim ago, you said about the border which moves, right? So it doesn't seem like he has this understanding of...
Why?
Because he has, from what I understood, from his perspective, the border is always clear, in the sense of...
I hear what you're saying. I don't think it's a machlokas as such.
Okay.
There are things which you can, there are things which you absolutely can't.
Okay, right. Okay, that's...
And those things, I think there are things which you cannot. Mm-hmm. Don't forget, this is brought in halacha.
Yeah.
The things that malamata, there are things that are unknowable.
Right.
And even within Kabbalah, by the way, there are sugyas that we stop at a certain place. But there are other things which you can understand, and therefore you must. And that's what he's saying. And I think that's in agreement.
Okay, good.
Yeah. And finally, the name Elimelech. Yes. He writes in Parshas Kedoshim, "V'tzarich adam ladas Hashem al yidei ma'asav hanifloim v'hanoiroim, u'lekasher ha'olamis hadei sof baruch hu shu ikar avodas yizbarach shemai." Contemplate the actions of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and through that get a deeper appreciation and knowledge and understanding of Him. V'lo yoymah ha'adam ba'atzmai. A person should not say, "Dai lo b'zeh shemamin sheyesh boirei echad amiti." That a person should say, it's enough that I believe there is a Borei Olam, and therefore I should not analyze and understand deeper through his Maisav Anifloim. You do have to come to a deeper appreciation of Hashem through what he does. That might be a contemplation of nature, it might be a contemplation of the, some people have come to Hashem, to Yiddishkeit, through an understanding of human anatomy and being objectively able to say the hundreds of millions, if not billions, of different processes. Darwin writes in one of his diaries that the human eye gives him sleepless nights. The complexity, the billions of cone rods and all the different things that have to happen within the human eye. Billions of parts that need to work together, and the chance of that all being some sort of random evolution, and that concept, which is, by the way, one which the Chovos Halevavos and Rabbi Akiva and others use at a very simple level, and that is one which we're going to see Rabbi Chanan Wasserman uses as well, as an imperative for Emunah, is one which it is a contemplation of nature, of things that we see, and that is Ma'aseh Hashem. Hashem speaks in many different ways. One of them is direct communication, is Torah, and one of them is there's a story the Chafetz Chaim writes in one of his letters. It was I forget whether it was 1902 or 1904. 1904 was the Russo-Japanese War. 1902, I think it was. There was a fire or an earthquake somewhere in Asia, And the Chavetz Chaim wrote a michtov, which I can get my hands on somewhere in my files, and he quotes the posuk we say in Baruch Nafshi, Oise malochov ruchos, meshorsov eish loyhet. HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes his malochim ruchos, the winds, meshorsov eish loyhet. The fire is his meshorsim. In other words, viewing, whether it's a tsunami, whether it is earthquakes, whether it is, and seeing in it Yad Hashem, and seeing is a way of contemplating Hashem al yedei ma'asov, and the Noam Elimelech is saying that a person should do that. To be fair, he doesn't say philosophy. That is not said, to be fair. But we've seen at least some of those sources. And then there's a lot more here, which I'm going to leave you with these. You can look at them yourself. So, for example, you've got the Chasam Sofer. You've got in your bundle here.
I'm surprised there were not so many Rishonim that you put in there.
So that was a mistake. I'm going to fill it out now. You've got in your other bundle, more Rishonim. So the most obvious of which is I want to go back to. So the rest you can do kind of in your own time. You've got here the Ponim Me'iros. Let's do the Pon. Okay, I want to go back to the Rishonim. Then you've got the Chasam Sofer down here, the Alter von Kelm, Reb Chatzkel. I want to add something, which is I think I've told you before, and you might find this a bit controversial. It's something I heard from Reb Matisyahu Zatzal, and it's based somewhat on Chazon Ish. And I think I have told it to you before, but I think it's important to mention. And one has to be careful how one says this in a respectful way, as follows. And this is to underscore the importance of what actually is the foundation of your Emunah. Let's take a Frum Yid who lo yaleinu v'lo yaleichem lives through something like the Holocaust, or maybe lives in Eretz Yisrael today, or lives anywhere, and a tragedy happens to him. A tragedy which is a real challenge to his sense of what you would assume to be fair, to be kind, to be, and it can range from, God forbid, lo yaleinu v'lo yaleichem, the death of a small child, and kal v'chomer ben bnei shel kal v'chomer, seeing parents, brothers, sisters, children butchered in front of your eyes. And we only need to go back to Simchas Torah this year in Eretz Yisrael and to see some horrific, unbelievably horrific things. We are always, unfortunately, constantly reminded of who we are as Yidden and what happens to us. I take a Yid who gets up every day, goes to davening, and his life on the whole is okay, the usual, within the parameters of usual challenge. And then a huge earthquake comes along. A huge in emotional one in his life, and something which is a huge challenge emotionally. How does that person respond? You cannot tell, as the Chazon Ish writes in his letters, in Emunah B'tochen very famously, there are many people who are mefatfatin, and they chirp Baruch Hashem, Emetz Hashem, but that is meaningless unless and until there is a challenge of this magnitude. And we definitely, it never happens. We hope it never happens. But when it does, people respond in different ways. And it's more than just their personalities. Some people are naturally, emotionally more resilient, and some people are more volatile in their personality. It's not enough to explain the range of differences. We're talking about two Frum Yidden that can go through the same level of immense challenge, and one will remain unshakable and firm and strong in their emunah and their commitment to Torah and mitzvahs, and others will throw away their Yiddishkeit on the spot. And this is, we are nobody to blame them, to judge them, chas v'shalom. Al todin es chavercha. But there were numerous instances of people who for 50, 60 years, Chasidic Yidden got up every day, put on talis and tefillin, went to mikveh, gave tzedakah, sat and learnt all day, and then they saw these terrible, horrible things happening to them. And I'm not just talking about people who went clinically insane. We're not discussing that, of course not. But people who then went on for the rest of their lives in a way that they were sane, but they said, that's it. I can't, less din v'les dayan chas v'shalom, and I can't be, I can no longer accept. An analysis of that is that one of them had an emunah. Their Yiddishkeit had firm, solid foundations, and it was earthquake proof and could withstand this incredible assault. And another, his Yiddishkeit was actually based on pretty much nothing. And therefore, haruach ba v'oikartoi v'oifachtoi alponov, and it's by the time you're challenged, it's too late, and it was gone in an instant. What is that difference? What is, and that is the question every Yid needs to ask themselves. And if it is just, and I think this is what's going on here, if it is merely, of course we accept, it makes it purely from a logical perspective, it would be insane not to accept what our Masorah is. And we accept our Masorah, fine. But if that is all it is, then it is superficial, because it's not negir to you at the deepest level. Only if you make your Yiddishkeit real. And this goes, for example, to the smallest things. It doesn't mean that you need to sit and now start studying deep metaphysics, and of course not. It means each time you go to the toilet and you come out and you stop to think, and your Asher Yotzar is an encounter with the Borei Olam. That is an investment in the relationship with the Rebbe Shem. You are speaking to the master of the universe because I've just taken a dump. Forgive me, I don't mean to be crude, of course. But it means I have turned the opportunity, it's an opportunity. And if it is, and it's real, but it's connected to me. So it's not actually, it's not even just about the philosophy. It means I've turned it is an encounter. And which, by the way, it's the only bracha where we mention the Kisei HaKavod. Ironically, I've just come from one Kisei, and then it's the only bracha, that is contemplation. That's using your seichel. That's the point. That is using your seichel and then your heart, and it becomes real. And one aspect of this is, if you have a brain, using some of the brain to create a depth of, that your Yiddishkeit is real, that whatever the challenge happens, you are able to withstand it. Okay? I wanted to mention this at this point, because that's also very, very important. Let's move on to some, Ellie pointed out quite rightly, it's been quite light on the Rishonim, and we want to go back to that. Before we do that, there is one thing I want you to see on page 3. It's a Malbim. Beautiful Malbim. It's a Malbim on the Aseret HaDibros. When he's talking about Anochi Hashem and Le'yelecha. Page 3, can you see it? Malbim. Page 3, Malbim. Ulam. Shtei ha-mitzvos ha'ele. Shehi metzius Hashem. V'she'ein zulosoi. Ze yasig ha'odom besichloi. An important idea here from the Rambam. These are things that God's existence and his uniqueness, and there is no other power, a person can and needs to be masig through his seichel. V'Hashem nota beseichel ha'odom yediyos nishtalu boi miledo umibeten. There are certain things, we've discussed this sugya before, there are certain things that people know a priori, but they have a divine origin. Remember our resolution of the Euthyphro and all that sort of stuff. Hashem nota b'seichel ha'odom yediyos, he implants in you some ideas. In other words, Emunah is to be found in you naturally. That there is something. It is fascinating to note that in this scientific age, you see, if somebody believed in God 200 years ago, okay, because frankly, science was as good as God. It was as good an option as anything else. And there were many, many, many who predicted the forgive me, the Nietzschean phrase, the death of God, in the 18th century. And he was put on trial, de Tocqueville, right? Famous quotes in the Enlightenment and afterwards. And yet, religion in the 21st century is not only alive, it is arguably the axis and the fulcrum upon which the stability and the peace and the harmony of the globe is dependent, ironically.
Yeah.
AI is not the reason for the conflict in the Sudan, in Gaza, if you draw it all down, so much. Look, even in America, the internal conflicts. Look at the battles that are fought about religious freedoms and religious rights and religion. You would have thought it would be any sane, normal, rational person would look at science and technology and medicine and everything that we are able to achieve where there is no need, apparently, for God in the 21st century and think religion will just be, people wrote it off. Many, many big thinkers wrote it off. And yet it's still here. Lord Saxal, in 1990, did a series of lectures for the BBC, which I have at home. It's an incredible book. It's called the Reith Lectures. Lord Reith was the one who started the BBC. And every year there is, the equivalent of your Hildesheimer lecture. So they ask a prominent thinker, a thought leader, to give a series of lectures. It's his yacht site, whatever. They call them the Reith Lectures. And he was asked to give them even before he became chief rabbi. It was in 1990. I have the book of the lectures at home. It's called The Persistence of Faith. And where he argues this idea, you would think faith would go. It should be a non-entity. And boy, is it front and center stage. What's going on? Hashem nota b'seichel, says the Malbim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu implants these ideas of a divine being, a single divine being, as being the source of all of reality, a priori is implanted b'seichel ha'odam. It's not social conditioning.
They can't shake. No one can shake.
They've tried and they keep trying and failing miserably. Just remind you, Hashem not b'seichel ha'odam v'yidias nishtalu boi mileido mibeten v'asher k'fidas a and which according to Plato, Tovi hanefesh ito mimkoir machzavto. Plato argues, says the Malbim, that the nefesh brings it with it. The nefesh brings its shoresh, knowingly or unknowingly, as it goes into the body. He brings it with it. This is who I am. I'm a nefesh. There's a soul. Sheyesh Eloi animtzo v'shehu echod. Commissioner Kosov, as it says in Eov. Ad shemisha yabit be'ein haseichel bebotei nafshay, says the Malbim. Somebody who is able to take an honest, deep dive into himself. Yimotzei deos elu tevuos benefesh kol odam. Nothing to do with being Jewish. They are naturally implanted in the nefesh of every single person. Umushroshos bin nefashos, and they are rooted in your nefesh. Kamoi haskolos rishonos, they are a priori, they are postulates, they are just givens. And there was therefore zero need for a messenger, a mediator, a Moshe Rabbeinu to tell us. And therefore, where did they come from? Hashem himself. Those two, the first two. Ba'u hatzivuyim ha'elu me'es Hashem yoitzer hanefoshois. V'hamitzaveh v'hamitzvah. So then what is the mitzvah? Sheyishtadel lodas ze b'yediah berura. Take this innate yediah that you have inside of you. Acknowledge its divine source, and clarify it further. That is the mitzvah, and that is why Torah, which is Gematria, says the Gemara in Makkos of 6:11, Torah tzivalonu Moshe, but Anochi and Layiyah mipi Hashem. We heard it from Hashem. Why? Because these are the things every Jew hears from Hashem. Every Yid, every person. It is notua in your nefesh. What I think, a beautiful, incredible, important Malbim. And we'll leave it here for today.